pixi-viewport today. If I don't figure out by today how the event works, then I'm gonna try to implement the simplest solution that I can to drag and zoom the canvas. Obviously, I'm gonna have to understand at some point how it works to be able to move the camera, but I think I'm gonna start trying to implement something if I don't understand how this works. So I'm gonna step through this and step into, and then keep writing stuff here, see if it clarifies for me. I'm gonna put some music, I think, for myself. Maybe I should do the Italian stuff. Before I start this. I don't think I'm gonna be saying anything. Just gonna step through the thing and see if I can understand.
Fa,
Fa,
Does.
fisso,
fisso,
Set. Unchanging.
3,
3,
3.
desiderare,
desiderare,
Desire.
aria,
aria,
Air.
bene,
bene,
Well.
anche,
anche,
Also.
giocare,
giocare,
Play.
piccolo,
piccolo,
Small.
fine,
fine,
End.
mettere,
mettere,
Put.
casa,
casa,
Home.
leggere,
leggere,
Read.
mano,
mano,
Hand.
portare,
portare,
Carry.
grande,
grande,
Large.
compitare,
compitare,
Spell. Words.
aggiungere,
aggiungere,
Add.
anche,
anche,
Even. Also.
terra,
terra,
Land.
qui,
qui,
Here.
devo,
devo,
I must.
grande,
grande,
Big.
alto,
alto,
High. Tall.
tale,
tale,
Such.
seguire,
seguire,
Follow.
atto,
atto,
Enact.
perché,
perché,
Why.
chiedere,
chiedere,
Ask.
maschi,
maschi,
Men.
cambiamento,
cambiamento,
A change.
è andato,
è andato,
He. She went.
luce,
luce,
Light.
tipo,
tipo,
Kind. Of thing.
spento,
spento,
Turned off.
bisogno,
bisogno,
Need.
casa,
casa,
House.
immagine,
immagine,
Image.
provare,
provare,
Try.
noi,
noi,
Us.
di nuovo,
di nuovo,
Again.
animale,
animale,
Animal.
punto,
punto,
Point.
madre,
madre,
Mother.
mondo,
mondo,
World.
vicino,
vicino,
Near.
costruire,
costruire,
Build.
se stesso,
se stesso,
Himself.
terra,
terra,
Earth.
padre,
padre,
Father.
There is one thing that I wasn't able to understand. Maybe I should search for the documentation of this, because it's from this point to the, like, inside of this function, it jumps to another function, but then like there you can't really see by just stepping through it. So, and it is this extensions here, extensions and extension type, and the auto-detect renderer function. So I don't understand really well how it works. But just stepping through it doesn't work. So I think I'm gonna search for these functions now. And if you go here, go back, and this loop runs the task. I'm gonna skip the task, but when it creates this stuff here, this is this extends class, and I don't understand how this works. And then from this, it's gonna jump to the render class. So like there is some things like this that happened throughout the execution, and I don't understand how they happen really well. And I think it's hard to find explanations. Because the documentation is just gonna have the functions. It's not gonna have the explanation of how it works. Yeah, it doesn't have anything. I'm sure if it ran is the right way to say, but this is good enough. It was not good enough. And this is the thing that I don't understand, because here is gonna go through the. So I think it's maybe when it calls this function, or when it does the import, it runs the functions here, or this line here. Because obviously it's looping through this thing here, which is the list, and then the list is gonna have this class, which is the extends class, and I think that this is the line that does that. That adds the class to the thing. Before the code gets to this point. And then it magically goes to this part here. So I don't understand how that works. It's probably not that important though, so. But it's still kind of annoying because I want to understand like exactly how it works. Event emitter doesn't have anything. It just initializes an empty object, I think. So I'm just gonna skip through that. And then this stuff doesn't have anything interesting as well, so I'm just gonna skip. And I think now is the part that starts getting confusing. So it creates this object which has these things here which are lists, and then through this is gonna initialize the class of runners, I think. It's gonna loop through the runners and initialize each one of them, which is another class that handles the function execution, I think. And then it's gonna initialize the systems, and this is an object that contains a bunch of systems as well. And I think here is the thing that initializes the event system. And then I think Pixi uses this two classes, systems class, system manager class, and the runner class, true. Decide what is gonna happen, I think. And this one, it passes the list that in the beginning, and then it's gonna loop through each one of them. The object doesn't exist, so it creates this runner on the system manager class. I think, yeah, at some point on the runner class, it's gonna start running to emit the events, and that's the part that is very confusing, I think. I'm just gonna skip through this one. It's gonna do the same thing, and then after it's gonna initialize the system here, the systems. I think order of priority is this thing here, which comes from the parent class as well, I think. Yeah, because priority is this thing, which comes from the config priority, which is initialized here. It's just gonna loop through this stuff, and then it's gonna initialize the system with these names here, I think. Because the I becomes the value on the priority list there. So it calls the config system and then maps through the system that it has there by priority, I think. So the priority is just decides which one is going to be initialized first. And then this is the system, and it passes the render. So it's gonna initialize each system through here, and then it's gonna put it on these places here. And this part's kind of confusing as well, but it's not that confusing, I think. It's just the runners is the object that is gonna contain the mapping, I think, through the systems of the functions and the systems. So it just adds the system to each runner, I think. That's what this does. Just gonna, yeah. Yeah, so the init is gonna be the runner, the runner class for the init function, and then it's gonna call the add method on that and pass the system. So it's gonna add all the systems to each runner, I think. That's what these functions do. I'm gonna skip through this because it's not that interesting. I don't remember exactly what point that it gets very confusing, but I think there's some line that is gonna initialize events, I think is very soon. And that's what I wanna understand. So like inside of all these classes that there, I don't remember which one exactly, but like there are some classes that initialize a bunch of matrices and the transform class as well. And I think those classes are the classes that actually handle the stuff on the WebGL. But I think this is after this part here. So there is some class as well that initializes, I think maybe it's this one, which is going to be the class that actually communicates with the vertex buffer and fragment shader and vertex shader. I don't remember the other one. Like the color shader and the one that decides the positions. Yeah, I think it's this function here is going to call this function at some point. Maybe. I think I'm gonna skip. Maybe is here that it calls the function that is confusing. I'm gonna skip for now. I think it's on this one. And so this is another thing that is confusing. Because I think this system was initialized on the system manager. That's the thing. So as it was looping through all of this stuff, adding the system to the runners, initializing everything, then, but I don't understand really well how does that work. Because obviously it's calling with the this keyword, so it means that this function comes from the system manager function or a class. Also, it has set up here. No, it's startup. So the question is, how does it go? I think this is not the confusing part, but I remember I spent some time trying to understand this, but I forgot how it works. Because this class by now it should have the runners, like, yeah, it is the mapping of the function, or it's going to be a string that represents the function, and then the class runner, and the runner class is going to have an object that has the systems, but you can't access that directly, I think. You can go from here directly to there, I think, because you're just calling the startup and then run. So it's like this class here has access to the startup system somehow, to call the run function there directly, and I don't understand how that works. This is one of those jumps as well that I'm gonna have to skip without understanding really well. It's probably not that important to the thing that I'm trying to do. It is still annoying that I can't understand. Maybe it's because of this, actually. Because it's when it initializes the system, it passes the render as the argument. So I think that might be the case. So, and when it initializes this class, it makes the render of this class be equal to the other renderer class. So I think that's probably the reason why. The thing that is difficult to understand is like why would that be the case if it's not inheriting anything? Because you would have to call renderer first. And I guess this is the line that starts getting confusing here. I think it's both this thing that it jumps through to here, and I don't understand how, and this line here that is kind of confusing. So now it calls the runners. I guess it's not that confusing actually, because I understand. Initialize everything on the system manager class. They're all the runners, which is an object that contains the strings that are functions, and then they map to the class. So this is going to be a class that represents the init, and the class is going to be a runner class, and then it's going to call the init function of that class, of the init. I'm going to pass render.options. So I think this one is going to initialize everything, if I remember correctly. The question is like, should I go back to try to understand? How does that happen here? Maybe I should know if I can try. Yeah. I think somewhere along those functions, maybe I missed it because it's one of those things that like it seems like it's not important. It makes it a part of the attributes of the renderer. I forgot which one. I think I'm gonna go back just see. Oh, this is class. Oh, I think it's here. That's the line. Yeah, I just skipped through this line and I didn't pay attention, I think. Because it seems like it doesn't do anything important. But that's the line. I think I understand now. So this line is gonna make an attribute of the like all of the names that it passes here, which is this I order of priority. So on this function, this priority is gonna make this an attribute, and it's gonna make this equal to the runner, which is y, or to the system. So it initializes all the attributes of the render class to the systems, and then you can call this function here. But I really don't like the way that this was done, to be honest, because it's not clear at all. Like, maybe it's the best way to do it, but I think it wouldn't make sense to put a comment there at least. But yeah, I don't know. And the question is, why does it do it like that? I guess like it might be lack of knowledge that I have or understanding, because I don't really like, it's hard for me to think about why they decided to go this way. Obviously there must be very good reasons, but like, why create all these runners and create the runners and systems and then like leave up to them to decide what's gonna happen? I think it goes back to the stuff that I said in the past, is that I think it's because of the way that the library evolved, because you don't know like what kind of systems you're gonna have, because they want to keep flexibility as they scale, because there's several different use cases, and it allows you to add different systems whenever you want it. So because you don't know which systems are gonna be added, it makes sense to, it's kind of like model view controller, the paradigm, where you have the model, which is models the database, then you have the controller, which connects the model with the view, and yeah, so that allows you to have flexibility, and so I think it's kind of like a very similar thing. But then what would be the model in this analogy? Because the startup manager, startup system, and system manager, the system manager would be the controller, I think. And the runners would be the controller. I guess the systems would be the model, I think. So the system is the model, the system manager is the controller, and the renderer is the controller, and the view is the canvas, the WebGL. No, but that doesn't make sense, because the systems directly impact the view. So maybe it's the other, but yeah, maybe it's something else, but I think I kind of understand now more. But it makes me think that it might be, like for my use case specifically, it's probably not the best option, I think. But like, I'm debating whether or not, because I always have the tendency of trying to like have as much control as possible, and I do wanna, like, part of me wants to build the stuff from scratch, like the code directly on using the shaders and the fragments and the other one that I forgot the name, to code that directly, so I have more control, so I understand more how like the visualizations are being created at the low level throughout the multiplications and stuff like that. And I think that because the thing is that like it feels very general and very confusing the way that it works, and I think that it would allow me to build a lot more things, I think, and to optimize a lot more if I build my own stuff. But the concern is obviously that obviously the library adds a lot of value, because there's a bunch of stuff here that people did it. So like I don't think that it is a bad library, but I think that it might be a better thing for me to go towards this direction of building my own stuff and forgetting about Pixie. So trying to reconstruct, like trying to see what classes directly change the view, change the canvas itself. But then I would have to create another project for this. Maybe later on it's worth to do that. And first I should figure out how to work with Pixie. But I really don't like this. Like, it feels wrong for my thing, for what I'm trying to do. Because I'm adding all this extra stuff that's probably, some parts are probably not necessary, and it's more for general cases. So, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe everything is makes sense for my use case. The thing is that I don't know enough, I think. Yeah, something to think about. I think this is the part that it gets confusing. So on this emit function, because on this loop here is very annoying, because it's gonna call the function for each one, and then that function is gonna call this thing again at some point, and it just does a bunch of repetitive things. But because there's a lot of things to initialize, like initializes something here, then initialize something somewhere else, and then that thing initializes this thing again, and then it gets like very confusing. But maybe it's like an overcomplication for what I'm trying to do. But I think that's because I do enjoy this, the idea of being able to put my visualizations on code, because I think that's it's gonna give me a lot of power to do whatever I want, because it makes it easier to think about it if you can put it on code, and also forces you to, it's like forcing you to think mathematically about reality, because you have to emulate what you're thinking, and then you have to think about all these nuances that you take for granted, which is the stuff about collision that I was thinking. Because when you look at the graph, you take everything for granted because you're used to it, but then when you're actually coding, it forces yourself to think about all of these things that seem obvious to you. So I do want to go to the direction where I have more and more control over the stuff that that essentially I can be able to draw anything that I want directly with the other thing that I was thinking about is that I'm probably gonna have to move to WebGPU at some point because it's faster. So, and you can train machine learning models using WebGPU. That's another very attractive thing about learning these things on the fundamental level. So, like, even though the stuff that I'm trying to do now, which is just a graph network, I think is not going to be that complicated to draw, and it's probably a waste of time. But the thing is, like, it would be nice, I think, to have more and more control, so I can change the way that visualization works in the future. This was initialized in the beginning, is the runner. So the other one calls the init, and this is the current runner, which is going to call the emit for. And then on the beginning there, when was initializing on this setup here, I think, when it was initializing all the runners, it created the items here, which has the systems and then the name. So each different runner is going to have a different name, and then depending on what runner it is, it's going to have different systems as well. So this loop is going to initialize them, I think. The name is the name of the function, and the item is the system, and then it goes system by system calling the function, and then passing this stuff as an argument, which is the options, I think. Yeah, render options. And then that's where it starts to get confusing. But on like functions very soon, but yeah. So I wonder if I should write this stuff down. If I'm gonna break down everything to try. Like maybe I should create another project and just try to build everything from scratch. I think that might be a good idea. I think first I'm gonna get to the point where I have the zoom and the drag, I think. Once I have the zoom and the drag and I can manipulate the nodes, then that's pretty much done on the visualization part. The only thing I'm gonna have to think about is how to resize the canvas in relationship to the website, and also change the CSS, which is gonna be a pain in the ass because CSS is very annoying to get it right with all the responsive and all the garbage. So once I get that done, and also like there's other stuff that I'm thinking about incorporating, which I think is going to be very hard as well, but maybe I'll leave that for later. But once I get to the point, I think it might be a good idea to create another project and just try to deconstruct this stuff from scratch, and then just get the pieces that I think are necessary and see if I can simplify. Because the other thing that I'm thinking about is that this library works in a very similar way that ngraph does as well. They build the code for the shaders by using string formatting. So they use JavaScript to use string formatting, and then that's how they build the structure of the code of the JLSL, I think, which is the language for the vertices, which is the stuff that creates the visualization. I think through the buffer or using the buffer. So I think it would be, obviously there is a reason for this, because then it becomes a lot easier to build everything, obviously, because you can build it from JavaScript by calling the functions it's going to call everything. But it would be interesting, I think, to code directly on the shaders as well, to understand more how the language of the shaders work. Maybe I should draw here on the sides. I should make maybe here. To keep track of what each class has, because different classes, the view system is going to have the string here, and I think the other classes are going to have other stuff that is going to create the model view projection, and then through the model view projection is the stuff that you create the animation. And then some of these classes are going to initialize the state of the WebGL canvas and initialize some matrices to change the state as well. I think maybe it's worth writing this stuff down. And then later on it's going to be easier to replicate or to deconstruct this and build it from scratch. I can barely see what's there. You can be right back. And this class doesn't seem that interesting, but I think I'm gonna write down anyway. I'm going to see what class, because later on, like, yeah, the question is how are all of these classes connected to change the actual stuff that is gonna show up on the canvas. So, like, what are the key components and how they're gonna be changed when I drag and zoom the canvas. And the 19 is just this indentation here. And I do this. Yeah. The only issue is that it's gonna take a very long time. I think I'm not gonna write down the plugin system. This is another thing that's it's kind of confusing because probably initialized this in the beginning there as was looping through all the systems and runners, or maybe even before that. Because the plugins, I spent time understanding the plugin manager class on the high level, not this one. The one that I can go over the source code there with through the files. And it's basically the stuff that is gonna manage the plugins, obviously. So you can pass this stuff as an argument, and then whatever you pass there is gonna be the plugins you're using. So here I'm using these ones. But then I don't think it's probably related to this, but it's not this exactly that's happening here. That's why it's confusing. Because how does this happen here? That's the question. I guess this is why one of the reasons why it's very difficult to understand the code. It's because they use the this keyword a lot, and there's no comments to say where the attribute comes from, because like there's so many different classes that are connected and initialized. So, and because like there's this inheritances and the properties, it becomes difficult to know from what class this is coming from. Because obviously these plugins here are not the same as the ones that it has there when it initializes its different classes. So, but I think maybe it's not worth spending the time trying to figure out where this comes from. So it's gonna initialize the class and pass the renders for each one, and then it's gonna map that through the plugin system. Did I write this stuff down here? I think I just went over this because there's so much shit to view. Oh, I think this is the app initialization. It's not even the viewport yet. Yeah. But obviously the viewport's gonna use a bunch of everything from the class in order to change the stuff. And let's skip this one. Maybe I should write this one down, actually. And it's gonna be on the plugin system. I think I'm just gonna write down the name, so don't waste too much time. Like I said, I don't think that this is bad. It's just that because probably everything is necessary to make the visualization work, and it's very complex to make it happen, but it's just difficult to understand what's going on. This is the function that pushes everything to the items in the beginning. When it's initialize the runners, I think. Or no, it's some of those functions. I think I'm gonna write down the names of each one and just because otherwise I'm gonna spend forever here. To know which ones are initialized in the plugin system. You can just get from the beginning as well. I think it is probably a good idea to maybe I should do this even before I fix the events. Or I should just do like the simplest solution that I can now. Which probably is gonna be to just calculate. I think that's the correct way to do it from the videos I saw. And from, yeah, just thinking about it, the way that you do it is just calculate the position of the mouse when the event happens, then check to see if any elements are on that position. If they are, you do some logic. If they are not, you do other logic. And then based on that, you decide what's gonna happen. And then if there are no elements, then you move the canvas and have to figure out. But for moving the canvas and zooming the canvas, I'm gonna have to understand more how it works. So maybe it's a good idea to just try to do this right now and then do the events later. Like break down this class and then try to create the visualization from scratch without using the classes. And by trying to understand how what each one is doing with the shaders. I think that might be a good idea. And obviously this one is gonna be related. Yeah, so this is the one that initializes the shader. One of them, obviously. And this is gonna initialize a program, I think. Yeah, it's vertex and fragments, the names. So, and uniforms, I think, is the stuff that decides the color, but I think fragments also decide the color. I don't remember really well. What's the connection between the two? I think this one I'm gonna put here. I'm gonna move this stuff here. think it's here. So. It looks like the OBS fucked up. I don't know why though, because even though I'm listening to music, I put the audio to minus infinity. Maybe there's something going on. But I think I'm gonna have to stop now streaming because last time the stream was cut and then the rest wasn't on YouTube later. So I'm not really sure if it's fucked up now or not. I think what I'm gonna do is write this stuff down. The way that they build this is probably on the other classes. The string itself. But I think I'm gonna write down actually, and then try to build it from scratch later. Oh fuck. Let me see if the stream is down. I think I might stop here and just continue to do this stuff off stream. Or maybe I'll keep going until I reach 2 hours. There's still 1 hour left. I think that's what I'm gonna do 2 hours because not it says that it's live here, but I'm not really sure. So I'm gonna do 1 more hour and then I stop and then I'll continue to do this off stream. I think what it's probably better The more I think about it, the more I want to do another project and try to do it from scratch. It's a lot easier to code things directly from JavaScript as well, because then you don't have to deal with all the bullshit from the frameworks. So like all the extra stuff, at least like obviously I haven't done so far, but it looks easier through the tutorials that I watched. If you just code like a normal simple HTML file and then HTML CSS and then one JavaScript file, it looks like it is easier, and then just put the shaders. So it might be a good idea to just break down this class first, then try to reconstruct the same visualizations by making the source code myself. I think that's probably the best idea, actually. Because then, even though I think it's going to take a lot more time, because then I'm going to really understand how, because I can implement the zoom and the drag. It's going to be easier to implement that if I have full control of what's going on and I really understand how the visualization is changing. And that's going to make it a lot easier to add the events on with using Pixi. Because the other difficult part is going to be to synchronize them with the physics engine. So the issue is the time, because I'm contemplating whether or not to submit an application to the Nights and Weekends project from BuildSpace. Next time is going to be 1st of July that they are going to start. I'm not really sure up until when they are going to accept applications. So this is the stuff that is concerning me, because ideally I would get to a point where I have everything set up and then I can apply. And then I think it would be very good. But my concern with applying right now is that Nights and Weekends forces you to do stuff just for shipping. And this is the critique I have about the program. And I think the direction that they should go is this evolution of information. Because right now, the way that they are doing, and I'm not really sure if they're going to change in the future or not, but it's the thing that I had a problem with since the beginning, is that because they accept a lot of people, a lot of different diverse group of people, like every single person is doing a different thing, it becomes really hard, because then you can't accept a very diverse group of people and then have the same update for all of them. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So, and this is the biggest issue, because then, if you have one person building a rocket and they have zero experience doing that, and then you have another person building a YouTube channel, for one of those people, if the update is the same, for one of those people, the work is going to do to create a YouTube video, which is very doable in 1 week. But then for the other one, is going to be to learn rocket engineering in 1 week, which is not feasible at all. So it's not a problem to accept this both groups of people, but then you have to increase the complexity on the nuance of the updates you make people do. And for me, the main thing, the core essence of a program like this, the reason why it's valuable, obviously, is what you can get out of it, but that's not the essence, because I think the essence is the growth you get. So this is the core essence, I think. And the reason why being part of a program like this is good, because it's the same as hitting the gym. So if you have a beginner, the whole goal is always to grow, and you should always take challenges that are slightly above your current level. So for a complete beginner in the gym, it doesn't make sense to make him go to failure every single time and just break himself and try to lift a lot more than he could, because he doesn't know anything. So it's just gonna break them. But then for a very experienced lifter, it might be a completely different type of training. And the whole key is always to make the challenge slightly above the current level of the person. So if you if you tell everyone like let's go to the gym, like everyone, a bunch of different diverse group of people, and then you give them the same exact training, like it's not going to be very good. For some people it's going to be very amazing because they're at the exact level that the updates make sense. But then for most people it's not going to be very good because it's going to force them to do stuff that doesn't make sense for their current level. And that was the problem that I had in the first one, the last one, the S3. Because I got into the thing, but then I had to shift my focus to stuff that didn't really matter for my growth at the time, to just to complete the update, and that doesn't make sense. Even though I was able to do it. So I think that, and because I don't know if they're going to change this or not, then it becomes very difficult to decide because I don't want to apply again, and then I'm forced to work on a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. But at the same time, like you should force people because that's the other problem is because if you don't put a difficult update for some people, then the program loses value as well. So because then everyone can do it and it's not easy, it doesn't force yourself to grow. And this is the key challenge I think that they have, which is to figure out like what is the best way to, and this is where the complexity is going to go to infinity because everyone is different. So it's going to be very difficult to figure out. But that's the evolution that I think they should go through. So how do I identify for each level, each stage that the person is at, what is the best challenge for them? And then make them do that update. And that's going to vary from person to person. That's why it's going to be extremely difficult to figure that out. But that's the evolution I think that they should go through. And for my case, like it's not always going to be to ship something. I think that's another like thing that is not very good. It is the way that it is now because the market economy forces it to be that way, but it's not a very wise thing to do, I think. And I think the clear example of this is AI, where everyone says like move fast and break things. But in some cases, it's not good to move fast. It's because you can go a lot further if you go slow. Because reality is counterintuitive. So, like the biggest concern I have right now is like on this time frame, and that's the reason why it's difficult to decide which thing to do. Because in one level, I want to get this stuff done as fast as possible, so I can submit the application and I can go over the nights and weekends program, because I do think is like very good and helps you, like gives you exposure. Helps you grow a lot. But then I don't want to apply, and then because I know I'm going to have a lot of other challenges, which is going to be the main challenge of building this, figuring out how to translate the information into visualization, how to parse the code in such a way that's going to be useful for people to visualize what's happening. So I don't want to submit and then I'm forced to make features just for the sake of making features, like build a different page and then build like some stupid visualizations, stuff like that, just so I can make the updates. And I think I remember Farza, I'm not sure if it was Farza, but was someone like in the previous season saying that shouldn't care very much about the updates, like. But I think that's the whole point of the program. Like I disagree with that. That's the problem, because like at least for people that are serious, I think that if they submit their application to something, they want to complete it, and there's a lot of pressure to complete the program. So like you have to be concerned about the updates, because that's how you know if you're growing or not. That's a problem. Because if the updates are meaningless, then the program is meaningless, because then there's no pressure for you to build anything. So this is the main reason why I'm not really sure like which direction to go here. Because I think that if I forgot about build space and I just thought about the stuff that I'm doing, I think is much wiser and better to build this stuff from the scratch. And because but then the downside is that it's going to take a lot of time, I think, because it is very complex to do. So another sense, it feels like you're wasting time, because everything forces you to move very fast. which I disagree. Like, it's the culture of building software, I think, right now, and that is a consequence of the market economy. Is everyone like technology is expanding faster and faster, so everyone feels the need to build stuff faster and faster, and the complexity is gonna grow exponentially. So you lose track of the fundamentals. That's the problem. But then, like, it's always this dance between the two, because you also don't want to be very slow. So So I think it first builds up the template for the vertex and fragment, and then inside of this class is gonna. This is the reason why it separates here, because I was thinking about why doesn't you pass the vertex source as this with the stuff already. But I think is the reason why is because it's gonna depend on what class is gonna initialize this, because they're gonna choose a different name and different precision. And I think that the reason the stuff about build space as well is that it's very like life in general is very analogous to poker, I think, where like most people are going to focus on the result, which is the what you gain out of the program, which in the previous season was the $100,000. And I think that that is very nice, but it's not the fundamental essence of the thing. And that's the difference. Like, if you only make about the money, then it becomes something completely different. Because then what's going to happen is that because you don't have a core user base, because by the nature of the markets, only a few people are going to win the money. So what's going to happen is that you're going to have very few people that are very happy as a result of the program because they won. And then the majority of people are not going to be happy because the process wasn't very good. And then what's going to happen over time is that the quality of the program is going to go down, which is going to make the like your thing go bankrupt. So the essence for me of the program, the reason why it's good is because of the growth, is the strategy. So it's not so much about where you are, it's more about how can you figure out what is the next level for you. And I think it's just like working out as well, where everybody wants to have the perfect shape, but then the thing is not like being in perfect shape, is just finding which level you are at, and then because that's never going to change, that's the fundamental strategy, and then having the awareness to know if it makes sense to be for you to strive to further levels or not, based on your hierarchy of values. I wonder if I should be writing down all these methods here. I think it's probably a waste of time. I can just read the documentation later, figure it out. Figure it out. I think what I'm gonna do later is just like once I have all of these names, I'm just gonna go over with ChatGPT to try to understand if ChatGPT can give me an explanation of what each thing is supposed to do, and try to reconstruct everything from scratch. And I still think it's worth it to submit your application to the program, even if they don't like as it is right now. It's already good enough, like to at least from my standpoint, to force yourself to grow. But like the value proposition of something like this, like the core essence to me is the like this is essentially what they are supposed to do, I think, in my mind. To figure out what like that's the function of the organization or something like this, and it's the same for college, I think, or any formal education system. And this is the problem with the education systems we have, and I think that this is the reason why stuff like build space, and the reason why I want build space and things like that to grow is because it's a fundamental shift in paradigm, I think. The issue with the formal education that exists nowadays is that it's designed to control people, and it's not about learning, it's about making you a slave. So something like build space is different than that because the paradigm is different. It's more about growth and like an abundance mindset, I think. So the whole function of the thing is to figure out what is the correct step for each person to take for them to grow, and that's going to be very different in every use case. So there's this relationship between these gradients of complex of skill and the challenge. So each person has a bar, like the bar of skill and the bar of challenge, and that's going to vary for each one. And then depending on what they are trying to do, those bars are going to change as well. And then the relationship between all the bars is going to create a wave function. And the evolution of information of the system is going to be the transition of this wave function in relationship to all the reference frames. So consciously or not, each person has a hierarchy of goals, and then they have the challenges to get to their goals, and that's the movement of matter in space-time. And the interaction between all of these different bars are going to be the shape of geometry in space-time, because that's the flow of information. So, and whatever, like, when people are not content or happy, is just because they lack the awareness to know the alignment of their values in relationship to their goals. So it means that they have the challenges that they have are too big for what they are, where they are. And the reason why this happens is because your subconscious system, your limbic system, makes you rationalize. It creates these very big, unachievable goals for you, so that you can justify to yourself that you're not going to make it anyway, so you don't have to spend energy. And like it's a trick you play in yourself, so you don't have to spend energy. And most people do this, and then because this builds up over time inside of the person, there's a cognitive dissonance, and that's when you feel depressed, is because there's a lack of alignment between your goals and what you're doing in life. So the function, I think, of something like build space or something like this, and the reason why I wanted to grow, is to optimize the clarity over this range of complexity between individuals and what they're trying to do. And I think that this is probably very important to figure out, because it's one key essences of AI alignment, I think. Because if you think about it, like, there must be a way, in the same way you can trick people into become crack addicts, and then once they become crack addicts, it becomes almost impossible for them to change, because it's all a wave function. Like, crack is essentially addictive because it's extremely good. So it creates the up of the curve first, and then the person becomes a slave to that, and that's the downfall. So in the same way that this is possible to chemically do this, I also think it might be possible to create systems that do the reverse. And I think that would be the optimal system for alignment, because it's essentially the reason why the market economy is dangerous is because there's a misalignment on incentives. Because the market economy is built on top of the desire of the limbic system, which doesn't have awareness over space-time. So it becomes short-sighted. It becomes a vicious cycle. Because all the power is being used to know how to hack human beings into going into vicious cycles loops that are self-destructive over time. So it probably is possible to create a system that does the thing in reverse. It's like if you switch the incentives and then everyone would slowly be able to, it would be incentivized, not forced, to take actions that would make them become better. And I think a core essence of that, a core part of that is the stuff that Build Space is doing, or the companies like that. Because essentially what you're trying to do is figure out, like, in the complexity of the system, like, how do you align the incentives and you clarify the challenges, the gaps between people's skill and the challenges, so that you give them something, let's say in a time frame, in a frequency, which is 1 week in Build Space, to get more in alignment with what they're trying to do. It's very hard to talk about this stuff because it's very complex. I'm always concerned that I didn't express myself like the way that I'm thinking about, because there's so much stuff going on. So I yeah, it's outside of my control to know if they're gonna do that or not. I tried to reach out to them. I think I sent a DM to one guy on the Discord, but then I changed my mind later. And the reason why I sent the DM is because I was planning on talking about this on stream at some point, so I wanted to like contact them directly, but I decided not to because I think it might not be like my place. Like I might be because it's obviously not my business. I'm not running, so and it might come across like, I don't know. But I feel like I have to say stuff here because it is related to the stuff that I'm trying to do. So where's this called? I think I'm just gonna go over this. Yeah, I didn't know if it made sense or not to tell them about this stuff. Sometimes people take the wrong way, so. And they might have a different philosophy as well, so. But I think I'm correct. And my concern is that I think they're putting like the focus on the wrong place, and it like kind of sucks because I do want to see them succeed. So I think they're putting the focus too much on like the information that they are giving instead of the. And I think this is another thing, is because it's a lot easier to say this stuff than to do it, because it is extremely hard. Like it is an extremely hard challenge, because how do you figure out what is the correct update that someone should send? Because you have two components. One is the diversity, which is going to be the complexity of the people that you let into the program. And the more people you allow, the more difficult it becomes, because it increases complexity exponentially. So like if you do a program only for people that are coding and they're coding this very specific thing, then it becomes a lot easier to gauge at what level they should be at part of the process, because you can use data and all these things. But then if you are accepting a musician, YouTuber, coder, all these different types of people, then becomes very difficult, because for each one of them, you're going to have to gather a bunch of data, and through the experience of the feedback loop system of the cycle of the nights and weekends, each time, ideally, you would be able to tell a little bit more at what place a person should be after 1 week or after 2 weeks, so that they can gauge whether or not they are on the right track or not. Because one of the hardest things to know is when should you give up on a project or not. And the answer that everyone gives to this is that, it's going to depend on the case, stuff like that, because what I think is happening is that it is a multifactor structure. So it's obviously going to depend on the case, but then you can create a machine learning model that is going to reduce the complexity of the system into a multifactor structure, and then you're going to be able to predict with some level of tolerance whether or not you should continue to work on something or not. And I think that should be the end goal of something like BuildSpace or a program like that. Is over time you capture more and more data, and then you're able to tell the new people coming in, like you're able to craft a customized update for the specific level of skill and the challenge that they chose, in order to allow them to maximize how much they're going to grow throughout the program. And if you do that, then I think you maximize the efficiency of the program and how, like, the core essence of the thing. And then even if people don't gain anything out of it, like they are not the winners, it's still going to be extremely good program, because it's just like going to the gym. So like you're creating a very efficient training program. So regardless of the outcome that people receive, if they go over the program and they submit all the updates, it's going to make them grow at the correct amount for them. I'm not really sure anymore. I think I lost track thinking about this stuff with space over where I'm at. I think I'll think about this until the 20th, and then I'll see if think probably what I'm gonna do, obviously I don't know if they're gonna accept me or not, but I think there's a very high chance that they will because I was part of the previous one, so I don't see why they wouldn't, but and I think by the 20th I'm gonna decide whether or not I should. It's probably gonna happen is just I'm gonna submit the application and participate on the program, but I'm not gonna force myself to do the updates. I think I'm just gonna focus more on the fundamentals of the stuff that I'm doing. So I think probably the direction that I'm gonna go now is more to break this down, create another project, and then try to build everything from scratch, and only then create the event listeners. And the stuff that I'm thinking about now that I'm gonna do is first figure out the event listeners. I think that's the last thing that I'm gonna do in relationship to the visualization. Then fix the resizing of the canvas, change the CSS of the site, build the front page again, and then after that create the custom component for changing the graph. And then after that I'm gonna focus on being able to parse the information. And who knows how much time that's gonna take, because it's extremely difficult for me. And that's the other thing that is relative as well, like I said before. Is that like for myself in the future, I think that's something that I'm doing now is hopefully is not gonna be as hard. Because like for someone that has a lot of experience, the same goal is gonna be a lot easier. So if I was building this and I was programming for graphics or game, if I was a game engineer or graphics engineer for 10 years and I had experience building stuff with WebGL, then I wouldn't have to spend all this time doing this thing here. Which to me that shouldn't be the core essence of the program. It should be detached from the result and focused on the process. And I think most people focus on the result, which is like how cool the project is going to look. And that's a concern as well, because that's going to be part of the marketing. But it shouldn't be the essence, I think. It should be like regardless of what level, because this is one of the positive things about Build Space, is that it allows people from different levels to be part of, and then they can like help each other. Which is also another thing that I have a problem with, that people say a lot, that you are the average of the 5 people you hang around with, because the issue is that that's true, but the problem is if you think like this, you become a sociopath, because you start viewing people as a tool. So like you're only gonna hang out with people that are similar to you, because that you become the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most, and then you naturally start seeing people through the lens of status instead of seeing the intrinsic value that they have, and that can become self-destructive over time. So I think it shouldn't be like, ideally you would have a program where both people that are very experienced and building cool shit are a part of, and people that are very inexperienced. And then the way that they gauge whether or not they are good is not by what they produce, is by how much they grow. I think that's the switch that needs to happen both on build space and on the macro level of the system. Like the system has to stop being about like how much you can get, and become more about how you can grow in harmony with the whole, I think. Because you're always gonna have to grow as well, because that's the nature of entropy and space-time. The only reason why time changes is because of entropy. So if you don't have growth, you don't have entropy, you don't have time. So there's always going to be but the growth has to be nuanced enough, because the problem is that the market economy is not nuanced. Like you can't put the brakes. It's not easy to put the brakes because there's no level of nuance, and the cycle gets corrupted. It becomes a vicious cycle. So everything is constantly forced to grow, but the problem is that it's growing in directions that are unsustainable to the harmony of the whole, because it doesn't have balance. Let's see how much time. I think I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna continue to go over this stuff off stream. I think this is the part that is annoying. The problem is that I lost track of where I'm at. I think I'm gonna have to restart from the beginning. But I don't want to do that on stream because I lost track when I started talking about this stuff about boot space. But I think this is the part that I was talking about there in the beginning, where once it goes here to these systems, it's gonna call the function. And then on the context system here, it's gonna call this event. I don't remember if I went through this or not. And then this makes it so that it goes back to this place here, where it's gonna call the context change function for all the systems again. So that this part gets confusing. So I think this happens once the view is initialized, maybe, because on the view is the stuff that has the functions that are gonna handle the creation of the WebGL context. And then it sets up the event listener that on context change is gonna do that. Is gonna update all the classes with the new context, which is another part that is complicated and I should probably understand more. But this is one of the things that I think I don't need. Obviously, I don't need if I'm gonna build this stuff from scratch, like in a simple project, because then it doesn't matter, like the context, also the parts. But it is necessary if I'm gonna use, if I'm gonna build things. So this is one of the things that makes me think that's because I don't know how hard, because yeah, the problem is if I build everything from scratch in my own project, then I'm probably not going to spend the time trying to figure out this auto detect render thing. And like the way that I would do it, I think is just, maybe I should just putting a simple if else statement to see if the browser has a WebGL context or not. And then if it doesn't, I default to the normal canvas. But then obviously it's not going to be as good as this one here, I think, because there's probably a reason for having this context system here and all these functions that are going to update everything and the context changes. And I think that my concern is because of React and the life cycle of components that I'm going to need to do something like that, because every time the components amounts, the context changes, I think. Or there's something related to that I remember seeing some warning some time ago about this. But I think I'm not gonna spend a lot of time trying to understand how the context works. Just gonna do the simple if-else statement. I think what I'm gonna try to do is another project, and I try to recreate everything by using the fundamental stuff here. Just try to create some drawings and try to play around the drawings so I understand how to scale and how to move the visualization at the low level. After that, I try to set up I think actually what I'm gonna do is today, after I stream, is just set up the template for the event listeners in the simple way that I was talking about. Just see the position of the mouse, see if there's any objects there, then put the if-else statements to determine the logic that is gonna happen. And then once it gets to the point where I have to put the logic to actually move the canvas, then I do another project and I try to reconstruct everything without using Pixi. And then I try to implement the events directly from the low level functions that I use that are directly changing the vertices. Then I go back and do the event listeners. I think that's the right way to do it, I think. But the way that takes more time. And then my concern with doing this is that I'm not gonna have enough time to apply to the build space thing, because who knows how long it's gonna take to figure this out, and I still have to figure out a lot of different things as well on top of that. So, but I think that's the route I'm gonna go. It feels that is the better choice long term. So I think I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna continue to do it. I'm gonna go back from the beginning and try to be more focused and see if I can understand. Probably, yeah, after I think I understand this, how it works, then I'm gonna stream again. And I'm gonna, next time I do the stream, we're probably gonna do the other project. Unless I change my mind, I'm gonna think more about this. So I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna go back from the beginning here and then step over again. So yeah, see you. Not sure how long it's gonna take, but yeah, see you next time.